Since the moment that I was able to comprehend sound, one of the biggest and most influential aspects of my life has been music. It is the one thing that has constantly maintained my interest and admiration. Today, I'm going to explain the history of one of the most important musical artifacts in my life, which is the Wish You Were Here album by my favorite musical group, Pink Floyd. My hope for this speech is to enlighten you all on this brilliant piece of art. Whether you have some prior knowledge of the album, or if it's the first time that you'll be hearing about it. And the main points that I'll be going over with you all today are what inspired the main themes of the album, a description of the recordings of the album, and finally, the impact that the album has had on the music industry as well as in my own life. So, to begin the history of this album, I will first explain to you what inspired its main themes, which were to pay tribute to a fallen band member and to recognize that the music industry was like a corrupt machine, constantly demanding more music and more fame from the artist. Pink Floyd started off in 1965 London as an underground psychedelic rock quartet led by the eccentric vocalist and guitarist Syd Barrett. Now, during that time, drug use had become very popular for its ability to expand the mind to new ideas, especially among musicians and artists. Now, Pink Floyd was no exception to participating in this trend, and they were well known for using drugs during their musical career. As the group's popularity grew in the underground music scene, all of the members of the band embraced their increasing level of fame, except for Syd Barrett. As record companies began to take more notice of the band, Syd Barrett began to withdraw from the spotlight and turn to drugs as an escape outlet. The band soon added a fifth member, David Gilmour, who also played guitars and sang vocals. Pink Floyd continued as a five-man group until one day when Syd Barrett did not show up to a scheduled studio recording session. According to an interview that I watched with band member Rick Wright in 2001, the band manager found Syd wandering around with a community of people who constantly took LSD to seek truths about the world. The manager warned the band that there was something wrong with Syd and that in his absence he had gone through a drastic change. And sadly, their manager was right. Syd had taken far too much LSD and had literally fried his brain, leaving him permanently changed from the outgoing person he once was to a man with a blank stare. He was let go from the band in 1968, and David Gilmour took over his role as lead guitar and lead vocals. Syd's tragedy was the main inspiration of the Wish You Were Here album, released in 1975. So now that you all know the story of Syd Barrett and how his tragic tale led to the inspiration of the Wish You Were Here album, I will describe the album and the recordings of it. Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here is known as one of their most successful and most popular albums, along with the world-famous Dark Side of the Moon, released in 1973, 2 years prior. Like any other CD album, it is composed of a 1.2 millimeter thick polycarbonate disc encased in a hard shell plastic cover. Now, according to the 2012 documentary entitled Pink Floyd, The Story of Wish You Were Here, the album artwork is actually symbolic for the second theme of the album, which is that the music industry is like a money-hungry machine that will only burn you in the end. This is shown on the album cover by two men shaking hands in agreement, with one of them, the artist, on fire because he has been burned by the music industry. Now, although these details of the album are important, nothing had more meaning than the actual songs that made up the album. The way that the band designed this 5-song album is actually very artistic, in that 3 of the songs are about the fallen band member, Syd Barrett, while the other 2 are about the corrupt music industry that ultimately led to Syd Barrett's mental breakdown. The first track on the album, entitled Shine On You Crazy Diamond, was directly written about Syd Barrett, with lyrics such as threatened by shadows at night, exposed in the light, referring to Sid's fear of the spotlight. This track was roughly 26 minutes long, and therefore was divided into two tracks, which acted at the beginning and at the end to replicate a book. The next two tracks, entitled Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar, gave the band's story of how the music industry initially welcomes upcoming artists, but soon has constant demands that eventually lead a musician to isolate themselves from fans and from the music industry. And the last song before the book-ending second half of Shine On You Crazy Diamond is the title track of the album, Wish You Were Here, and again acts as a tribute to the original singer Syd Barrett. Perhaps the most memorable event to occur during the recordings of this album happened just as the band was putting the finishing touches on Syd Barrett's tribute, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I learned from the book entitled Inside Out, written by Pink Floyd's drummer Nick Mason, that as the band was finishing the recording of this particular track, a random stranger wandered into the recording studios. Everybody saw the stranger come in, but it took a few minutes until they actually realized who it was. It was none other than Syd Barrett, and it had been 7 years since any of them had last seen him, and he appeared fat, bald, and he had no eyebrows. When the band members questioned how he got so round, all he did was reply with, "I've got a coloured telly and a fridge full of pork chops." That's all he really said. He hung out with them for a while, but eventually he left and was never heard from them again, until 2006 when the news came out that he had passed away. So, now that I have told you about what happened in the recording studio as well as a description of the album, I'll finally explain the impact that this album has had on the music industry as well as in my own life. Though the album initially received bad criticism, it has since been recognized as one of the greatest albums released by the band. In 1975, the album's release year, people judged the album for not living up to its predecessor, Dark Side of the Moon. However, as time went on, it was given its due credit. It went on to take number 1 on the UK album charts the year of its release. And as of today, it has sold more than 13 million copies worldwide. This album's major effect on me is due to the fact that I have lost somebody dear to me, just as the band did. Almost 2 years ago now, a friend who was more like an older sister to me passed away at the young age of 20. Whenever I hear the song Wish You Were Here, or even listen to the album in its entirety, it brings my sister Jessica to mind and evokes all the emotions involved with losing a loved one. So this is why that album is so important to me. So now you all know some of the important details of the history of Pink Floyd's 1975 album, Wish You Were Here. What I discussed with you today was the inspiration of the main themes of the album, the recordings of the album and what happened during the recording sessions. Finally, I told you about its legacy and how it affects my own culture. I hope that from this speech, you are intrigued by the history of this great album, and that one day you will listen to it and get as much out of it as I have.